Telekinesis, the ability to move things with my mind. I have dreamt about that since I was a kid. It'd be perfect. I wouldn't have to get up to like close the door, open the windows. It'd be wonderful.
What would you do with it?
Um, Probably make my coffee from the other side of the room.
Day to day, I love it.
Right. Exactly.
Hi there, and welcome to this week's WP Elevation podcast. I'm Jen McInerney, and I'm the digital producer here at WP Elevation. You are in for a treat this week as we have Andy McIlwain from GoDaddy with us. He's the Chief Content Wrangler and Community Builder there, and he's got some fantastic tips for us, which you can get in a downloadable checklist with the podcast. And the tips are all about creating content that actually works. So if you've struggled with actually getting content up, or even then leveraging that content, this podcast is a must tune in. Andy walks us through the 7 P's of creating content, and you are going to love some of the tips he comes out with. Stay tuned.
This is the WP Elevation Podcast, helping WordPress consultants elevate.
Hey, this episode of the WP Elevation Podcast is brought to you by WP Elevation. Well, more specifically, it's brought to you by a bunch of our happy customers. See, frankly, I feel a little bit awkward telling you how great WP Elevation is because you're probably not going to believe me because WP Elevation is my baby. It's something that we started over 3 years ago. Of course, now we're a team of coaches and mentors, and we have hundreds, and by the time you're listening to this, probably thousands of members all over the world. But it still really is something that I'm very passionate about. And of course, if you join WP Elevation, we make revenue and we make profit. So it's a little bit awkward if I tell you how great it is, because you probably think I'm just trying to sell you on it. And partially I am, because I know how beneficial the program is. So what I'd love to do instead is just introduce you to some of our customers. So if you go to wpelevation.com/the podcast, all one word, you'll be able to hear some of those stories from our customers and hear for yourself how WP Elevation has impacted their business and changed their lives. I hope you enjoy that, and I hope you check it out at some point. Right now, let's get back to the podcast.
Andy McIlwain, thanks for joining us on the WP Elevation podcast.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So can you just give the audience just a brief overview of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Andy McIlwain. I'm a member of the content team at GoDaddy. I work remotely from lovely Toronto, Canada. Most of my work involves content in one form or another, whether that's webinars like the ones we've done with Troy, or blog posts, or all sorts of other stuff, ebooks. I'm usually involved in one way or another. Focused primarily on web design and web development topics.
Beautiful. And you're doing some stuff with GoDaddy Pro community. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So GoDaddy Pro is a suite of tools that we offer for free to web designers and developers to help them manage their clients and more specifically manage WordPress at scale. So rather than, for example, having to log in and log out of a bunch of different clients' GoDaddy accounts, you can access it all from one place. And there's other stuff that we have included as well, like Managed WP and other neat tools that are really helpful.
Sounds good. Now, your passion and your focus is community and content. And in this podcast today, we've got half an hour and we're going to focus on the content side of things, which I think our audience will love. I suppose as a web consultant, there's so many tools that you have to master. So why do you think that mastering content is such a critical thing for a web consultant, web developer?
Well, I think that there's a couple of aspects to it. The first one is that in terms of your own work, when you're trying to go out there and promote yourself and find new clients, content is probably the best way to go out and actually generate those leads. If you just rely on advertising, as soon as you stop running ad campaigns, those leads drop off. Word of mouth takes a long time to build up. Content is something that you can do out of the gate and start creating these assets that you can use for advertising, that you can use to fuel word of mouth referrals, and it just fits into so many places throughout that marketing funnel and the customer lifecycle. So that's one aspect for yourself in-house as a designer or developer. On the flip side, it's also something that you can offer your clients. If you're building websites, chances are content is going to have to play a role in there somewhere, and it's another service offering that you can provide. So not only are you building the website and taking care of the design and development, but if you can also get into producing content as well, that's another value add for your website plans.
And some people find this is one of the biggest things they struggle with. I'm not a good writer. It's not my strength. Is it something that everyone can do?
I think so. I think that folks don't give themselves enough credit. I think that anyone who's in the business of building websites and helping people get online, you know a lot. And you may not know as much as somebody that you see as an influencer or someone that you look up to, but people are looking up to you. There are people that refer to you as the professional, and that means you have things that you can teach, and that's all great fodder for creating content.
Yeah, definitely. If you focus on your skills and what your strengths are and then use that as the content, that's a great way to start, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, you put together the 7 Ps of content creation. So can you and I thought we could go over that today because I love it. They're easy to remember. And there's we could do a whole podcast on just one of those Ps. But if we can try and go through those, and if we don't, Andy's put together a great checklist for us, a cheat sheet at the end that we can sort of go into a bit more detail on. But well, first of all, what made you sort of get this together and put it all together?
So back when I was doing a lot of client work and working with B2B marketing agencies and small biz marketing agencies, I found that having some way of templating a lot of the processes was really useful. It just helped you implement things much more quickly, which meant you could do more client work at any given time. And I started thinking about, well, in terms of content production, is there a simple way of thinking about these things, or is there a framework that you can reference just to make sure that you're hitting on all the things you need to hit on? And so for me, it started off with thinking about the types of content to produce, and then it just iterated from there. Well, what's the next step after thinking about the types of content? Well, I need to produce it and promote it and yada, yada, yada. And so that's where the 7 Ps came from.
I love a good checklist. I love something that you don't have to think about, that you don't know, have I forgotten that? Do I need to include that? And I just think I was looking through it and you've got everything ticked off here. So I suppose the first thing that people don't really put enough work into is the preparation. So preparing your goals. P number 1.
Yeah, so P number 1, prepare your goals. So back when I first introduced this thing at a WordCamp up here in Ontario, WordCamp Hamilton, I was talking about these 3 different steps within the marketing funnel. But now I think of it in terms of 4 different steps. You have reach, teach, sell, and support. And what those are is at the top, if you imagine the funnel and typical marketing funnel, at the top you have your reach content, or in the case of your prospective client, it's the content that is helping them discover you. So this is all the content that you're putting out there on social media. It's stuff that you want to get found. It's the stuff that brings people awareness of your existence and what you do.
So not necessarily too detailed.
Yeah, not too detailed. It's supposed to grab attention and bring people in.
Mm-hmm.
The next step down from that is teach and learn. So your goal is to teach people with this content. It's something educational. It's something that solves a problem. And on the client side, or the prospective client side, it's helping them learn something and learn something new. And that could be advice on how to do something. It could be solving a very specific problem, but there's an exchange there. You're giving them information, they're solving a problem, they're doing something with that information. The next step down from there is sell and decide. And sell doesn't necessarily mean you're closing a deal. It means that you're convincing them to take the next step and give you something of value. Now, that might be an email address for them to subscribe to a mailing list. It might be getting them to request a quote. Anything where they're giving you more sensitive information about themselves, contact details, money. There's a greater exchange of value at that level. And then down below that, the 4th one that I've started thinking about more recently is support and use. So after you've helped your client or prospective client come on board, you have that process of introducing them to how you do things. And then once you've built their website, for example, you're helping them use the website. So your objective is to support them, and their objective is to use whatever it is that you've built for them. So from the top to the bottom, it's reach, teach, sell, support. And for them, it's discovering you, learning from you, deciding to do business with you or exchange something with you, and then using the thing that they've gotten from you.
Right. So each of those steps are quite critical, aren't they? But I think the teaching one, when you get to that, that's really important for building the trust. So unless they have that trust of you and what you're doing, and they know that you're putting out some good content, they're not going to go to those next two levels.
Exactly. And if you think about the actual experience of how somebody is going to decide to do business with you, it's not going to be an immediate 1, 2, 3, 4. They'll find your stuff, they'll read it, they'll leave, they'll come back, they'll read more of it. Maybe they decide they'll subscribe to your newsletter, and then they'll click through from that. So they're hopping around in that funnel between different steps before they get to the point where they're going to do business with you. And in some cases, it's going to be faster. In some cases, it's going to be slower. But they're going to be hitting on all those touch points at some point on that path to becoming a client of yours.
Right. So with this funnel, I think it's important to remember then it's not going to happen overnight. So this has to be, you've got to consistently be putting out this content and building up that trust. And I think even once you've got clients from it, it's an ongoing process, isn't it?
Exactly. It's something that you are sustaining over time. This isn't one and done. This is an ongoing maintenance, operationalizing thing. It's something you just keep doing.
Okay, so we've got this funnel happening and we've prepared the goals. The next P is plan your topics. Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so in terms of planning your topics, I guess if you go back like 10, 15 years, when people were thinking about what content to produce, they were thinking in terms of keywords. What things are people searching? I prefer to flip that on its head and think in terms of a teacher. So if you are going to position yourself as an authority on something, what are all the things that you would teach about that subject to educate the person? So remove your business owner hat and put on your teacher hat and start breaking down all of that content into different topics. And then from there, that's where you can start thinking about exactly what pieces of content you need to put out, what posts are you going to write, what presentations are you going to put together. The example that I use for myself, there's 3 big themes that I tend to write about and talk about, and that's content, community, and WordPress. So for me, content is one big bubble, and so it's content strategy, content development, content promotion. But then there's community, and there's community organizing and planning and managing, and there's all those themes within there. And then for WordPress, it might be WordPress themes, WordPress plugins, building WordPress sites. But we have all of these central topics that are branching out. And that's where I start from. I'm not thinking about a very specific blog post. I'm thinking about what's the overall topic or theme that I want to convey as something that I'm an expert in or something that I'm very knowledgeable in.
I like that. So let's not get too specific at this stage. Think about what your talents are, what your skills are, what your knowledge is. Focus on that. And don't even think about SEO at this stage. Let's think about teaching instead of, all the other palaver, because the key is getting out good quality information in this day and age, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's good. Yeah. Okay. So then from there, you've got your topics planned, you know what you're an expert in. So now it's about producing the content. So this is quite a big one.
Yeah. This is the one where I think a lot of people hit a wall, and I know for myself it's tough. Shipping is tough. It's hard to just get over that hump. What works for me, and I know it's different for everybody, but what works for me is starting off with writing. And the reason I like starting with writing is that what you write can be repurposed into all sorts of different formats. So whether you decide that you want to put stuff out on video, or you want to do a blog post, or you want to do a podcast, everything starts with writing. And that might be a script, that might be a creative brief, it might be a storyboard, who knows? But it's starting with writing. So firing up Google Docs and just starting to brain dump your ideas, get all of that written down. Don't worry about making it perfect yet. Divide the practice of writing from the practice of editing. Just get into the habit of capturing your thoughts and getting things written down and noted. And then once you have that, that's where you can start filling in the gaps by going and doing research, going and finding the rest of the information that will fill in the blanks between the points you want to convey.
So that's the process you use. You just sort of start dumping your thoughts on the paper, or what do you do? Do you use Google Docs? Do you have a notepad with you?
So, so yes to all of the above. So I'm always surrounded by notepads, and a lot of stuff
sign
starts
of a
off
good writer.
there.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of that. If I am out on the road, I use an app on my phone called Todoist, and I'll just jot down quick little tasks for myself, saying like write a blog post about this or investigate this subject. And then when I'm actually ready to write, it's usually in Google Docs. If I'm trying to work with folks who are mostly in the Microsoft Office side of things, we'll do Word Online. Both are free. They run on the browser, so they get the job done.
Great. And Google Docs, I'm making a note of these. Bedside table. Do you ever have anything on your bedside table and wake up in the middle of the night? You know, some people get these inspirations.
So this is starting to show that I have a bit of a problem. So I also have an iPad. This is on the bedside table. Yeah, and so if I do have a thought that pops into my head, you know, I'm just lying there, I'll roll over, I'll open up the iPad, I'll jot it down. The important thing is just having something nearby that will capture your thoughts as they come to you. If you think you're going to remember it later, you're not. You're going to forget it, or you're going to miss out on certain details. Just capture those thoughts in the way that's easiest for you when you can, and just transfer that from whatever form it's in into the actual document that you're going to be working on when you have a chance.
Yeah, that sounds good. Now, and you just also touched on, so once you've brain dumped all of that, the research is really critical too, because you need to add some authority, some external authority, and show, you know, it's not just your thoughts. You've done research on this as well.
Exactly. So there's a couple aspects to that. The first one is that you're adding credibility by pulling in information from other sources, and you're also teaching yourself as you're going through the process. As I was building out this presentation on the 7 Ps, I was referring to a whole bunch of other posts by other people and looking at how they approached creating content and what tools they used. And that became very informative in my own process. So not only are you finding sources to cite, but you're also learning and learning through doing that as well. One of my favorite ways for finding good content about a particular topic, in addition to Google, of course, I use BuzzSumo quite a bit to find content that's gotten a lot of social shares around a particular topic.
Love BuzzSumo, it's great.
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite, one of many, one of my favorite tools, but one of many.
It's a freemium tool as well, so you can start on the basic level and then, yeah. Oh, good stuff. So, okay, now this is the bit, P number 4, let's repurpose. So for everyone out there who finds that content writing hard, this is the bit where, well, okay, you've done the hard work. Let's see how we can get the most out of this.
Yeah. So one of the other nice things about writing, as I kind of mentioned, was you can take that original piece of content and you can go and do a bunch of other things with it. And one of the things I like doing the most is going and creating a presentation. And I know PowerPoint probably isn't the most appealing thing to everybody, but you can do so much with a PowerPoint or a Google Slide or a Keynote deck. You can take your key points from the content that you've written. You can, of course, create your presentation based on that. But then from that presentation, you can do a recording and create a video. There's some video content you can put out on YouTube. You can host a webinar with that presentation as the basis. You can export specific slides and use those as images for social media. If you want, you could stack all those slides and turn that into an infographic for Pinterest. There are so many different things that you can do out of a presentation, and it's a lot faster to churn out some easy visuals from Google Slides or PowerPoint or Keynote than trying to fire up Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop or something like that. So highly recommend seeing what you can do with just a presentation as a starting point. And then once you become comfortable with that, start branching out into
I totally agree. There's so much leverage you can get from this, and even using it as a lead magnet on your site. Give us your email and you get this free video presentation where you'll get X, Y, Z. So I think there's so many possibilities, and that's such a crucial stage of this. You've done so much hard work. Don't let it all stop at one blog post or one whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Squeeze as much value out of the content that you're creating as possible. Find all the different little ways you can slice and dice it. Another thing you can do is go back over the content that you've created, the long form written article, and using a tool like Buffer, and Buffer, another freemium one, freemium extension for Chrome, you can go in and tweet out particular snippets and quotes from the article that you've written. So there's a whole other way of using the content that you've produced.
Yeah, definitely. And it saves you having to sit down and think of a million different sort of tweets for it as well. Yeah. Great. Okay, so once we've done that, moving on to number 5, promote. This is the fun bit. I like this bit.
Yeah, so promoting your content. So after producing the content and repurposing, which is hard enough, a lot of people will get to that point and then they'll drop the ball on the next part.
Yes.
Of actually going out and letting people know that you've produce something. The first thing you should do, and this is where most people are kind of okay, is promoting the content you produced yourself. So putting it on Twitter, putting it on Facebook, just doing some organic social shares. But that's not enough. I mean, you're just producing it and promoting it to your audience. You need to start tapping into the audiences of other people. So I mentioned BuzzSumo already as a way to research content, but BuzzSumo also has the ability for you to research influencers and finding people who are well known for sharing social media content about different topics. So with a tool like that, or something like HeyPress or Help a Reporter Out and these other tools, if you can find people who have an audience, then figuring out a way, whether it be strategic partnerships or just asking, do some reading up on link building as well. But you want to get in front of their audiences.
And a good way of doing that too is, I suppose, even if you've done some research and you've found this person's got some great information on it, include them in the content, and then let them know that you've included them in the content, and and then hopefully then they can promote it as well.
Exactly. And one type of piece of content that you could create that is very much made for that is if you decide to run surveys. If you're having a hard time researching stuff of your own and producing long form articles of your own, try running a survey. Run a survey and ask a whole bunch of people for their opinions or their recommendations on a particular topic. And then once you have that all compiled into a lovely article, reach out to those people after you publish the content and let them know that it's up there. Not everybody that you invite to participate in the surveys is going to respond, but even if a percentage of them do, you still have some content coming out of that, and there's someone who's probably more inclined to share the content that you've produced.
Yeah, just on that, I had an email yesterday that I was responding to. Someone reached out, they're doing a blog post, and they're contacting 30 good entrepreneurs, and they want to know what the secret to their entrepreneur success is. So give us 1 to 3 things of advice that you can give people on your success. So they were asking Troy, and so if you think 30 people, not everyone will respond, but then they've given a few responses, and then you've got a headshot of the person. You can link back to their site, so they're happy with that too. So then you might have potentially 30 people sharing this article. So there's a huge way to, to do it without too much effort. You don't even have to write too much of the content yourself for that one.
And there's a perfect example.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so promotion, this is where it starts to get that little bit, I suppose this separates the people who are just doing it on an average level for those people who really want to lift the game and take it that little bit further. So after you've done this promotion, which is also an ongoing thing, I think it's important to know about participating. So you're sort of giving back, you're not just taking all the time. So our number 6P is participate.
Yeah, so participating in communities. This is another one of those things that you should just be doing anyway, because if you are participating in, let's say, your local WordPress community, it's a great way of not only finding people that might need your help, so potential lead generation, but also potential business partners. Back when I was doing a lot of freelance work and working in agencies, we formed some great partnerships with other agencies and other developers who we could subcontract to or partner up with that allowed us to take on even bigger projects. But for the purpose of content, participating in communities online and offline, it's another way to get your content out there. Because if you're able to, let's say, answer questions that come up in a meetup or in an online group with content that you've produced and published on your site, that's a great way of finding new topics to write about, and it's a great way of giving people something relevant and possibly getting more links pointing back to your site, but at the very least, getting more visibility onto the content that you're producing.
So give me some examples of you saying online and offline getting involved. Give me some examples of that.
Sure. So online, there are groups like Advanced WordPress on Facebook where you'll find people asking all sorts of questions. And the easiest thing to do in those cases is to just answer the question in a reply. But if you're able to take that question and use it as a prompt to write something more long form, or maybe do a video or presentation about that question, and then drop that in the reply in the comments, not only are you giving value back to the person who needed help, but you're also giving value to all of the other people who come across that reply. And it's not just contained to that one little comment on that post, it's pointing back to your site where then more of your content can be discovered. On the flip side, with meetups, actually there's an example from a recent WordPress meetup we had here in Toronto. Someone was asking, how can I monetize my WordPress website? And the conversation that followed up from that question went off in one direction, and I had a different opinion. So rather than just leaving it at that, I used that question as a prompt to write a new blog post. And then after I wrote that blog post, I went and shared it in the group. So there are always these little nuggets and opportunities that'll come up in meetups, at events, online, where if you're paying attention, you may see an opportunity to address something in the form of new content that you can publish through your channels.
So it's a win-win situation, really.
It really is. You're helping people out, and at the same time, you're doing a little bit of marketing for yourself.
Exactly.
And there's an acronym I always throw myself back to, ABH, always be helpful. And if you just start with that and think about that first, the promotion and the good karma and the marketing will come from that. But if you lead by providing value, that's going to win every time. So just think about that.
Yeah, I like that. ABH, always be helpful.
Always be helpful.
And there is that law, and I can never say this properly, the law of reciprocity. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, you put stuff out there, and if you don't expect to get stuff back, but you sort of think, yep, no, I'll do that, it always does come back to you. And I think that's what I love about the WordPress community as well. I think everyone really is helpful and wanting to, help each other, genuinely wanting to help each other out.
It's a fantastic thing with the WordPress community, and you see it all the time when you go to WordPress meetups and WordCamps. There are so many people that are there just on a voluntary basis. They want to contribute. They want to give back. And it's probably my favorite thing about the WordPress community and why I've been involved with it for so long. Yeah.
Now, let's finish with point number 7, and I can guarantee, and I bet you probably know this as well, even if 80% of us listening today did the first 6 points, I can guarantee that a lot of people are not going to go to point 7, but this is the stuff that you have to do. And I haven't got an analytical mind, so I can tell you that it wouldn't be me doing it. But tell us why proving that this stuff works is so important.
So the very last step, after you've been producing this content and promoting and participating in communities and getting all that good stuff coming back into your site, you need to make sure that this is actually hitting on the goals that you're setting for yourself. So if you think back to the very first step where you're preparing your goals and figuring out what sort of content do I need to produce, well, all of those bits of content you're producing have different objectives. The reach content is meant to drive people to your site and to raise awareness. The teach content is meant to bring people back and to get them on your site and staying on your site and checking out other content on your site. The content that sells or drives people to convert obviously, that needs to drive them to convert.
Yeah.
And then the content that helps them use your stuff. Well, are people actually using the site? So when you're building a site, are they actually going in and are they able to do what they need to get done? And that's where this last step of proving that everything is working is so crucial, because if you're not measuring and watching all of these different indicators, you're flying blind. You could just keep doing the same thing over and over again, but you don't know what's working and what's not. So when you refer to the checklist that'll be made available, you'll notice that against each one of those steps, reach, teach, sell, and support, there are different KPIs. And so at the very last step for proving that everything is working, you want to be monitoring those KPIs and course correcting if things are off. So if the content that you're producing to get shared isn't getting shared, obviously you need to adjust that. If the content that you're producing to drive conversions isn't driving conversions, maybe you need to do some optimization on those landing pages, or maybe you need to adjust your forms. But you need to be watching those indicators and making sure that everything is working in order for this content to be worthwhile. If you're just flying blind, not worth
Good luck. Yeah, if you're flying
Exactly.
blind, good luck. So give me, please, some examples of some tools that we can use to monitor this. I know there's lots of different aspects, but what are some of the tools you use when you're doing this?
So at the base level, I'm a big fan of using Jetpack and just the WordPress.com stats.
Yeah.
It's not fantastic in terms of detail, but it's better than having nothing. And if you're looking at content on a client site, so going way back to the beginning of this conversation where we're talking about what's the value of content, if you're doing content on a client site, Jetpack is a good starting point. Next step beyond that, Google Analytics, absolutely. In terms of the amount of data that you're going to get, Google Analytics, nothing comes close.
Yeah.
But there's another tool that I'm a big fan of called Hotjar, and it's a freemium service as well, but it's really good for qualitative data. So if you want to, for example, look at recordings of how people are using your site, so where are they clicking, where are they gesturing with their mouse, you can see things at that level of detail. You can also throw surveys at them to ask questions, gather feedback about the content on your site. So you can go much more granular through Hotjar. And then if you're looking at content at scale and you're interested in maybe getting some affiliate revenue, maybe you're not just interested in using content as lead gen for yourself, maybe you're thinking about this as also like a publisher play, Quantcast Measure is another tool. It's free, that gives you some demographics insights, which is very helpful once you start going down the path of acting more like a publisher with your content on your site.
Oh, that's good. And I'll make sure all these links are put in on the page as well, so people can download that. So I think it's very important that you do, but the other thing is not to get overwhelmed in this, to maybe sort of think, okay, just choose a few tools that you know I'm going, even, this month I might monitor this, or, for the next couple of months monitor this. So you're not getting overwhelmed in using too many tools. Just pick a few things to see what's working. Start small without getting too overwhelmed.
Yeah, and with certain content like the reach content, the content you're putting out on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, these platforms have native analytics built in. You don't need to go and fire up some third-party analytics dashboard. Pay attention to the stats you're already getting, because those are good as a starting point for your KPIs. Just focus on those KPIs and don't start obsessing too much over all of the other information that's getting thrown at you.
Yeah.
Focus on the things that really give you a strong indicator, and don't stress about the rest.
That's good advice. So, like, the one biggest takeaway from this, if someone's thinking, oh my gosh, this is actually there's a lot of steps here, it's sounding overwhelming, what's the one bit of advice you'd give?
Start producing content. Bit of advice, just do it. Yeah. If nothing else, you get over the fear of either the content that you're producing isn't good enough or that you don't have enough time to do it. Just get into a habit of producing on a regular basis. Your content will improve over time. The quality, the production values, all that will improve. Yeah. And by forcing yourself to do it, you'll make time for it. There's only X number of hours in the day. You just need to make the time to make it happen.
Yeah, set aside, like after listening to this podcast, I want you guys to go, set aside some time once a week, to start off with, however long you think is practical, put that time aside, set a little goal and see if you can do it. And I think what we say too is take imperfect action. It doesn't have to be the best blog post, the best presentation. Just do it and build your confidence up.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Andy, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. It's lovely to meet you. And
likewise.
I'd love our audience to sort of continue this conversation. So put some comments below and Andy can get back and have a chat to you. But where's another good way people can reach out to you, Andy?
Easiest place to find me is on Twitter at AndyMCI and also my blog, AndyMCI.com.
Beautiful. Okay, well, thanks for joining us and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Have a good one.
How good were those tips from Andy? If you want to make sure that you've got them at hand and you can print them out, make sure you go to wpelevation.com/Andy McIlwain, MCILWAIN, and you can download that free checklist that summarizes all of those tips. And also make sure you subscribe to iTunes. We'd love you to go over and leave us a rating and review, wpelevation.com/iTunes. So your mission this week, should you choose to accept it, is to put aside a little bit of time each week to start really focusing and getting that content that you've got up and at it. Start leveraging it and see what you can do. Leave us some feedback below. I'd love to hear your comments on how you're finding it. Until then, go elevate.